Good morning, Joe Enberg, Bluebird Semaphore. And this morning, I'm going to do an afterwards for my book, Blackbird. Remember that? The one that was published for about 2 weeks by Amazon. And then they notified the intermediary, which is an outfit, I believe, called Amazon Publishing, but also that the Kindle group was in the middle there too. And basically they took it down. And I protested a little bit because, once again, they said the reason for taking it down was that I had a prior account with Amazon. Now, there's one thing that cannot be further from the truth, is that I ever had an account with Amazon, because I just don't like those people. I never did, and I never will. So that was a lot of hogwash. But, there's very little, and I said this before, that a lone individual like myself is going to do when up against the 800-pound gorilla. By the way, I really don't care either. It's not getting your book published. It's freaking writing it that's important. It's getting the insights that are necessary to write a book. That's what's important. Getting it published, who cares? If I cared, I wouldn't start writing until I had a publisher lined up. All right, but that being said, I'm back on this, and this video, hopefully I'm going to title it as an afterwards for Blackbird. Looks like I just won't let this die. Anyway, why an afterward? Well, because today, in an attempt to continue reading the book I'm reading, called Far East Asia, I picked up by mistake a book I had previously read and finished probably a couple of years ago, maybe more. And it's called Anatomy of Paradise by J.C. Fornas. So I picked it up and I said, I'm not going to spend time reading this stuff. But I flipped through it. There was a bunch of pictures. And I looked through them, and two pages facing each other were of missionaries in the 19th century out in the South Pacific, in this case in Melanesia. And I read the tiny bio for each one of those missionaries. And one of the missionaries was called Bishop Patterson. And a little bio in there said he had met a cruel fate. I think it even said something about him dying with his boots on. But the cruel fate was having his head bashed in by natives in retaliation for raiding the island to get laborers, for the Queenlands, Australia, and Fiji sugarcane plantations. So the islanders didn't like that, so they smashed his skull. He was making a friendly visit, supposedly a friendly visit, on his missionary rounds. And at this time, he had been in the business of being a missionary for about 15, 16 years. And then he was gone. So I immediately just said, well, yeah, there's some information about what was going on. And what I did next was I started to look up in the magic box the name of the said bishop, Bishop Patterson. And lo and behold, he had made quite a reputation for himself when he came out to the missions out of a fairly distinguished scholarly type background from England. And I guess it was through an associate who was also part of that scholarly English background, who was going to go out to the missions in the islands, the South Pacific. And I guess he encouraged his friend, Bishop Patterson. He wasn't Bishop Patterson at the time. He was probably just Reverend Patterson. So they went out, and he does a lot of work as far as evangelizing the Melanesian, the islanders, so on. And before you know it, he has his own bishopric. But one of the island groups that was in his charge was the Santa Cruz Islands, which is at the southwest extremity of the Solomon Islands. And as you well know, my book, Blackbird, talks a bunch about the Solomon Islands. Anyway, this time frame that the good bishop got himself dead was, I think, approximately 1870-71. The reason why I know that with any kind of accuracy, because in the magic box, there was an article, the Melbourne something newspaper, dating back 1871, with an accounting of what had happened to their good Bishop Patterson. Now, at the time, his diocese was centered out of Auckland, New Zealand, but Melbourne was the overall, you want to call it the overall episcopal authority, and Auckland was within that authority. So that's why the story gets read up in the Melbourne something or other newspaper, approximately 1871. And I think if you bang it in the magic box, you're going to get that. You reel the whole story. Now, the whole story actually has quite a lot of interesting facts, including enough facts to make me somewhat doubtful of the description I came across in Anatomy of Paradise, that Patterson's demise was due to his carrying off natives for the purpose of blackbirding. Basically, to give all parties their due, I would say it's at least likely that the natives of the island, the Melanesians who did in Bishop Patterson, just simply said, anybody who's taking people off our islands are blackbirders. Because what Bishop Patterson was doing, he was going to all these islands scattered around the Melanesian part of the South Pacific and taking youngsters, meaning mostly young, perhaps teenagers, and I believe mostly males, taking them back to New Zealand for the purpose of training them in Christianity, and by so doing to make these Melanesians more in likeness to the folks of the West. Now, the Melanesian natives that did him in, they didn't know from this. They didn't know from missionaries or anything. All they know that people were being taken off the islands, and in some cases they were subjected to what looked like and smelt like slave labor, the blackbirding dealies. So they could have got that mixed up. Maybe Fornes got his information from people who had it mixed up. I don't know. Blackbirding, as you'll find out if you ever read my book, and if you like, I'll send you a copy. Printed up. I think I got it written up in a PDF file or something. But I have it. I could send it to anybody. Probably to be nice, if you wanted it, you would somehow include some postage, but you don't have to. So you would let me know of your desire to have Blackbird in this file format. And I do have it segregated into chapters for easy reading, and you would send it to Joe Wins 189 at gmail.com. Of course, you could always subscribe to my channel, and once you do that, you can make comments directly to me asking for the file Blackbird. As far as I know, it's not available anymore out there. As far as I know, although it wouldn't surprise me if somebody is still offering it for sale. Because there was supposed to be like 5 or 6 of these outfits that were involved in getting the thing published in the various formats. And although I don't like reading anything that's been printed off a computer, and it's basically essentially a computer file, that you're reading on pages, I just don't like that. I have to have the feel of the book in my hands while I'm reading. Otherwise, I don't want to read it. But sometimes you have to acquiesce, So if you're at all interested in reading Blackbird, let me know. I'll send you the file. And if you're nice, you'll put in a couple bucks so I can pay for the postage. Or I could just email the file back to you. Obviously, if you've subscribed and you're contacting me through YouTube, I'd be able to just send that to you, which is probably the way to go. Yeah. That's my card for Bluebird. Nice looking card, isn't it? Yeah. All right, so that's what happened today, and that's why I'm here talking once again about blackbirding and the relentless pressure that the West always put on the East, always trying to make the East be like them. Good case in point is, of course, Japan. Japan, being an extremely conservative society for hundreds, if not over 1,000 years, they simply didn't want to be like anybody else. All they wanted to be was themselves. But along came, I think it was Dewey, and pressured them with a cannonade to open the ports. And of course, after that, the rest is history. The Japanese figured out if they were going to have any chance at all to survive in the pond with the big fish, they were going to have to turn west, or they were going to have to assimilate Western ideas, Western culture. However, never think for a moment that the Japanese actually believed in any of that stuff. They never did then, they don't now. They believe in the Japanese, and you know what? I give them credit. You know, you wish the people all over the world would continue to believe in who they were and who they are, instead of, taking flight to every nuance that comes on the scene. So, the pressure of the West was just astronomical. And many of the Western powers did their taking overs kind of sneaky like. They wouldn't go to the public, because the public was, in most cases, was not interested in aggrandizements of empire. For the most, public opinion was to, leave us alone, let us raise our children and eat our cakes, drink our ale, just leave us alone. So we don't want to be going out and eating up the Philippines, eating up the Marshall Islands, eating up Wake, Hawaii, all over the place. And for the other countries, India, eating up the New Zealanders, eating up the folks that lived in Australia, all over the place, eating up the Native American Indians in Canada, eating up the Native Americans in Central America and South America, all over the place. And these people that wanted to go out and eat up the rest of the world, for the most part, had a lot to gain by doing that. So they wouldn't, put their motives out there for the rest of the folks to think about. They would do it in secret. They would secretly take over those places, and they would talk to each other in quiet, dark rooms all over the world and come up with their treaties and their negotiations, and essentially over time, make the world that we now have, make the world that became World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, the oil pot. These folks who were highly placed individuals throughout the various countries created the platform that would, in 50 years, 70 years, 80 years, eventually become the killing fields of these countries who just wanted to be left alone. The Western countries. Be left alone, do their trade. Yeah, they wanted to trade. And instead, their boys, their young men and women were sent to the slaughter fields in the hundreds of thousands. And these guys who were setting this all up behind the scene, granted, they may have not seen the end results, but they were astute enough to know that their treachery would, of course, bequest more treachery. And to make a long story short, but not that I'm cutting this off yet, is that we could not be in a more dangerous time in human history than we are right now, which is essentially mid-year 2024. These are dangerous times. And they're probably more dangerous because people, as far as I can tell, don't recognize the dangers, as far as I can tell. So, to me, the reason I wrote Blackbird, which I did write, I believe, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more, I don't know, was, I had seen something that I found very strongly about, which was this slave-like behavior, slaving-like behavior of blackbirding. To me, they were very similar, very similar. They try to get around it by offering their captives a contract, which of course wasn't worth the paper it was written on, and then sending these guys off to be beaten and downtrodden in the hellish cane fields of Fiji and Queensland. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go into a cane field. You don't have to go that far. You can go into Jamaica or the Dominican Republic and walk through those fields and see how that cane cuts you. And then imagine yourself being out there all day long with a machete trying to cut that stuff, and then doing it under, basically a slave-like atmosphere, But that's what the West has always done. The West has always been able to manufacture individuals of extreme insensitivity to their fellow human beings. And these people that the West has been able to manufacture still exist, I suppose, at the highest levels of society. And they presented fraudulent appearances of themselves so that they could march around in their countries as the well-loved, the smartest, the brightest individuals on the planet. And this, of course, still goes on today. And if anything, it is accelerating. Back in the day, maybe there would be 100 of these individuals scattered around the globe. Today, sorry to say, it's probably more like 10,000 or 100,000 of them who with no sensitivity for their fellow human beings, with no sensitivity towards the environment, go on. So, and I go on and on like this because, to me, nothing would make me happier than to see Blackbird start to become a little better known. And some of the ideas discussed in there would become a little better known. All that being said, the Blackbird, of course, is not the only book I've written. I wrote a second one right after Blackbird, and that one was called, or is called, Witness to an Execution. The big juju ferry of West Africa. And yesterday, which I thought quite interesting, you may not, but in that book, in that story, in the West African part of it, some of the characters, they come upon a church in the African jungle, but tamed down jungle, not the, not the deep jungle of East Congo, but the jungles that you would find closer to the west coast of Africa. The west coast, yeah. In West Africa, and a church that I refer to it as the Church of the Bleeding Stones. So obviously it's a stone church. And yesterday on a documentary YouTube, this dude is getting on the largest, and oldest, I think, passenger ferry in the world. And that passenger ferry is operating on Lake Tanganyika. And I had started looking at that documentary a while back, not that long ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. But I got distracted. So when I saw it up there yesterday, I watched it. And I'm thrilled. Anything about Lake Tanganyika, because as you know, David Livingstone was up and down the shores of that lake trying to find the source of the Nile. I have no idea why anyone would want to find the source of the Nile. I mean, that bewilders me. But they and many others, Spree, I think, is one, and Robert Burton, not the Robert Burton you're thinking of, and many, many others. They all want to find the source of the Nile. Stanley, yeah, was the dude who went after Livingstone. But so here I go. Here's this old time, I think, built around 1913 steamship plowing up and down the shores of Lake Tanganyika. Its history was it was interrupted for World War One World War One or World War Two service, but not a lot. I mean, the Germans took it over, and then it goes back into being a regular ferry. And I was thrilled to death to see this ship, the only one of its kind in the world today, and able to stay afloat and go plow through that water, hundreds of passengers, cargo, the whole works, and seeing the landscape of Tanganyika in the meantime. Now, this was all the east coast of Tanganyika. Now, it's important to me, because people that I'd been reading about to try and understand Africa oftentimes got themselves on the east coast and then tramped their way back to Zanzibar. It's a long trek. I think it's over 700 miles. Not for anything, I do believe Livingstone was on that trek when he finally gave up the ghost. So, the impressions I got when I was just reading about this stuff and the images I was creating in my mind were pretty much nowhere like what Lake Tanganyika is really like. Quite impressive. And the guy doing the documentary, I don't know his name, I'm sorry, I'd give you a plug, but he manages at the end to get in to a nature reserve, not a big one. I think it was 100 acres, but and it had a troop of chimpanzees, wild chimpanzees, and that was the intention of his trip up Lake Tanganyika, was to get there, go in and see the chimpanzees. Why? I have no idea. Why anybody would want to see these chimpanzees is totally beyond me. These are animals that will rip your face off as soon as eat a banana. It shouldn't be within 100 miles of these animals. Anyway, that's my opinion. And if you know the story about what happened in Connecticut and what happened in many other people but chimpanzees, because they are aggressive and they are big and they are strong and powerful, and they'll rip you apart in 2 seconds. You're better off hanging with a bunch of gorillas than chimpanzees. So anyway, people are they think they're so cute when they do these kind of things. Oh, look at me. I'm looking at chimpanzees. Hey, why don't you get your kids and come on out here and look at the chimpanzees too? Maybe they'll eat you. Listen, there's just no end to the stupidity that people do. Just no end to it. Look at all the people killing themselves walking up mountains. Mountains that wiser people left to the gods. People much wiser than us. They left those mountaintops to the gods. No, along comes modern man, he climbs up them and he dies. He falls off. He experiences a horrible death. He trashes the environment. Also, he can go back, if he's lucky, and he gets back, he can go sit in his cocktail party and tell everybody about his adventures, climbing up the North Face, or climbing up K2, or Everest, or any of the rest. You would wish that those countries, that those mountains reside in, would declare all of them out of bounds. And quite frankly, I really don't think, based on what I'm seeing, that they would lose that much tourist revenue. I just don't think it's that big a deal. But the human species will persevere in being, just about as ridiculous as you can get. So anyway, from a return to Anatomy of Paradise, I got off on the Bishop Patterson thing and a relook at Blackbird and a relook at the South Pacific. By the way, when I got the book Anatomy of Paradise, before I read the author or anything, I had mistaken it for a book by Michener, which was Return to Paradise. And Michener's book is nothing but a collection of short stories, kind of like in the Hollywood mode, boy meets girl and all is well, which I don't recommend that book by Michener. I think his original stuff on the West Pacific, which centered, I believe, on Hawaii, was good for collecting information about that area. But Fornass's book is much better, by the way. I mean, there's some very good information in that book to anyone who's interested about the Pacific, the South Pacific, and so on. Very good information. I think it was written essentially mid-20th century. I think that's perhaps close. What else can I tell you today, folks? Anything on your mind? If you subscribe, you could always leave me a message. I don't get a lot of subscribers. I wonder why. Anyway, if you have anything you'd like to say, you could either email me, as you know my email, or you can subscribe and make a comment. I might reply. I don't have to. I might not. Who knows? As they used to say, only the shadow knows. Anyway, hot as blazes out here today. We're going to get a bunch of days in the 90s in the upcoming week. We had a bunch of days last week in the 90s. And this is only June, the end of June, but it's only June. We used to never see 90s. If we ever saw 90s, it would have been in July, maybe August, but not in June. So, as much of a doubter that I am, I have to say that there's some evidence of global warming, although I continue to believe very strongly that there always has been periods of global warming, and we just may be in another one of those periods, perhaps enhanced by the effect of fossil fuels and large particles in the atmosphere, preventing the heat to escape into the stratosphere, to escape into the great, vast unknowns of space. But instead, the heat stays down here with us, and you can feel it on your head anytime you go out there in this 90 plus weather. So try to stay safe from the sun's rays. I worry about the thing that we used to worry about constantly 20 years ago, the holes in the atmosphere, the ozone holes, or whatever they were called, letting unfiltered radiation through, all sorts of terrible things. And yet, the Western March, never ceases. It keeps on banging ahead. And in the minds of the ones leading the march, they believe they are step in line with the will of God. So, when you know that the will of God is to pulverize the earth, then you'll be at least in marching the right step. You'll be in line with what's going on and what has been going on for centuries. It's just speeding up now. It's just speeding up. What are you going to do? It's like when somebody says, why don't you do another painting, Joe? I don't say it, but internally, what I'm thinking is that, why bother? This is all going to be over, not that distant a time. Why even bother talking now? It's ridiculous. The only thing is, I like to talk, and I do like to paint, so I probably will paint again. But you can't burn up the environment. You burn up the environment, you burn off the forests, and then that's it. That's it. One day you're going to be able to survive. The next day, nobody will. But what are you going to do? Nobody pays attention. All they pay attention is to the next rock group, the next pair of special clothing, the next drug. What is it? Some drug now people are taking, and they're finding out it's going to screw with their brains. Listen, you can't make this stuff up. You can't. And this is, and I'm so inclined to say that so much of the bad stuff that's been promulgated onto the world was done by so-called missionaries who thought they were coming to do the work of God, when in fact they were clearing the way for commerce. That's what they were doing. I got sidetracked with the Japan thing, although the book wasn't supposed to be about Japan. It was supposed to be about China, Japan, Korea, and that group of rascals. Russia, Eastern Russia, and got away from looking a little deeper into China as they went off on Japan. However, I can't continue to harangue Japan as a monster, although, let's face it, with the amount of heads they were cutting off at any given time. I mean, yes, they were monsters. And like the old adage goes, the leopard doesn't change its spots, nor the tiger its stripes. So, that being said, whatever was in the hearts and minds of the ancient Japanese, I'm sure still resides there. The only thing is, they're all caught up in their hideous lives where they have to constantly perform and make more garbage. Otherwise, they won't be able to keep their 600 square foot apartment. No. So, they certainly don't have the attributes of Japanese life, say 400 years ago, or even 900 years ago. Now, does any place on earth still have that? No, but I could just point it out. I feel sorry, at one time, for the most part, Japanese life could have been pleasant, even if you were a peasant, calf high in muddy water, doing your rice paddies. But so were, many other parts of the earth. That's what they did. Rice, for a while, was the major crop for humans. Rice. And the East was pretty much making it. So anyway, folks, listen. This is a very long video. I see it's already up to 42 minutes. Hopefully you'll have the tenacity to stick with it. I'm continuing to practice the piano and the new device I got, the used Yamaha PSR 270. And I did manage to get a manual, but their instructions are heinous. So, but I have no other alternative. I have to try to deal with their instructions if I'm going to get anywhere with the keyboard. I'm starting to come up with certain opinions about these things. They're really synthesizers, and they're based on your input. In other words, what you're doing with your fingers. They then output certain musical sequences. And you can use that, and you just fill in with what you're thinking musically. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. Although, I really would rather know the right way to use this thing and use it the right way. But Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm going to sign off now. Have a nice time. Stay out of this heat. Stay out of the heat. Don't cut down vegetation. 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 There, did I say it enough? Or would you like me to say it some more? All right? What would you like? I'll be posting another video, I would say soon, about about jungle gardening, which is which I started doing recently. I think I have 2 up there in jungle gardening, and somehow by posting that, shortly thereafter, every time I go on YouTube, I get inundated with these posts about this type of farming, that type of farming. And it's all small scale. It's all mostly organic. It's mostly a different twist. It's not It's not, you know, some of the terms they like to use is no dig. In other words, you don't dig in the ground. You do everything in pots and raised beds. I'll come back to that in a minute. But so that is also all the wild plants that are edible and medicinal. It's just website after no website, you know, YouTube channel after YouTube channel going on about this stuff. And it makes one start to consider that what is wild is the manufacturing of YouTube channels to talk about beekeeping, raised bed farming, how to do strawberries, how to do this, how to do that, which is not a bad thing. You know, it isn't. But as anything else, once you get so many people doing it, then you start to need to make choices. Who am I going to listen to? Who knows what they're talking about? Who doesn't? So already I'm at the point where I essentially don't bother to look at those, except if something truly catches my eye, something that I might be doing right now that would be of some value. You know, for example, one of the weeds I see a lot of in the backyard, I can't think of the name right now, but we used to have a discussion about this. And a lot of people thought, oh, it was super good, edible, wonderful. And I really didn't pay it any attention because, A, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it looked like. But now I know what it is and I know what it looks like. So because of the YouTube things, a whole channel dedicated to, or a whole video just dedicated to that particular wild plant. So I come back to that, the jungle gardening. And by the way, the critters were already attacking my raised beds. I'm a little bit upset about that, but once again, as I've said before, the critters will get what the critters will get. If if I wanted to put netting around everything or fencing around anything, I would, but I really don't want to. I like the natural look I got going on in the jungle garden. The return to wild look. So you may want to consider doing that yourself. By the way, it's not difficult. Which, like most things, I have found that if you have true desire to do such a thing, you'll do it, and you'll find it not to be that difficult. Now listen, some good things happening, some bad things happening, but mostly I don't listen to the bad things. You know, who needs to bum yourself out listening to the latest versions of politicians or the latest versions of science? You know, no need to bum yourself out. I can't seem to bring myself to stop, but you know what? I have to. So here I go. Nice talking to you. And like I said, if you want to actually talk to me, you can email me or you could subscribe. And then when you make a comment, I'll know that you made the comment. And the ball can start rolling like that. All right, here we go. Bye-bye.